welcome all of you today to Push to Publish. We're officially celebrating our 10th anniversary, which is really hard to believe. Robin Black's story collection, If I Loved You, I Would Tell You This, was a finalist for the Frank O'Connor Story Prize and the winner of the 2010 Philadelphia Athenaeum Fiction Award. Her novel Life Drawing was longlisted for the Flaherty Dunham First Novel Prize, the Folio Prize, and the Impact Dublin Literary Award. Her work has been published in such publications as the New York Times Book Review, One Story, O Magazine, Condé Nast Traveler, and the Chicago Tribune. Robin lives in Philadelphia with her family and teaches in the Rutgers MFA program at Camden. Please welcome Robin Black. My remarks are not long, and I'm hoping that afterward we can engage in dialogue of some kind. They're also kind of serious, but if you talk to me afterward, I'm not. So it's just sort of had a serious impulse here. So here we go. As I stand here, as we gather, we are exactly 1 month out from electing our next president. And I freely admit that I have been obsessed, even before yesterday's car wreck of a bombshell of a news story. Over the past several months, I have not only become your favorite friend on Facebook to unfollow because of the deluge of political posts, I have become that person who sometimes at night can barely sleep for fear of what to me is the wrong outcome. I am that irritating intruder who calls you during dinner trying to pin you down on when you might be able to volunteer to make similar calls. And I am a person too who also, let's be honest, has followed this race a bit as one might follow a reality TV show. Not that I will ever admit to having followed one of those. For all of the terror I feel, and I genuinely feel it in my skin daily, I am also perhaps inevitably caught up in the drama, in the gossip, and in the adrenaline bursts that result. One way and another, this preoccupation has cost me many of my working hours and most of my creative drive. And as we draw closer to the finish, I am aware that when it's over, I will be back to my life, which means back to being full-time consumed, not by political trends and worries, but by writing. And while my first hope, of course, is that I do so in the comforting knowledge that my candidate won, I also hope that I do so with some new wisdom that I can bring to my work. Or if wisdom is too big a word, and it may well be, let's say instead I'm wondering if after months of immersion in our political system, I have learned anything I might bring to my desk. I have certainly learned that we are a divided nation, divided and angry. This election has been shocking for the seeming ease with which people of all convictions have allowed themselves to dehumanize those with whom they disagree. I see it on both sides, or as there have been more than two candidates, I should say I see it on all sides. The hours I've spent on Facebook and on Twitter are hours filled with people saying things about the candidate they don't support and about that candidate's supporters that are simply despicable. People do not so much disagree as they believe the other side is satanic. I myself have issued posts that either state or imply that some large number of my fellow human beings, my fellow citizens, people I have never met, are horrible people. And I have certainly seen the other side say the same about me and my political cohort. Disagreement escalates to the point of disgust and of disgusting behavior until there is a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy at work. As each group's standards slide, the accusations leveled at that group gain credibility. I may think that the other side is worse than mine, crueler, nastier, but they doubtless think the same about me. Before discussing what I believe this all might mean for writing, I want to backtrack a bit to life on the internet before these particular socio-political lines were drawn quite so definingly. I am a fan of much of what the internet gives us, but I am wary of the Trojan horse nature of the gift.
For a long time now, I have been meaning to write an essay called The Death of Forgiveness. It could also be called The Death of Compromise, The Death of Conversation, or The Death of Investment in other people. Long before this political season, I would see exchanges online that went more or less like this. Person A says the sky is blue. Person B says, no, it's gray. And person A says, you're blocked. The challenge of disagreement is solved by banishment. I'm not talking about the phenomenon of blocking or unfriending genuinely toxic people, but this other thing I have often seen of jettisoning those with whom you simply disagree. Words matter. We are writers, we know that. And the very words unfriend and block are words that never until this era applied to human relationships. Friendships failed, but they did so over time. People got second chances, sometimes third, sometimes too many. Sometimes a terrible argument might precipitate a broken connection, but the presumption about human interaction weighed in heavily on the side of continuation, working things through, and also tolerating people who might irritate you, sometimes a lot. Of course, it has to be said that people online are by and large blocking and unfriending folks they don't know very well. Those of us who move in that realm interact on a regular basis and often with a strange presumed intimacy with people we have never met, acquaintances. And acquaintances have never required of us the kinds of commitments to working things through or to tolerance that our loved ones do. But it is still true that as a society, we have now formalized and normalized the process of disappearing folks who simply bug us. And in doing so, we have also normalized and formalized both rudeness and also a drive away from empathy, away from compassion, away from patience, and away from trying to see things the way the other fellow does. These years now of interacting in an environment in which other people can be dismissed so readily and replaced so easily have played a role in creating the environment in which this political season has passed. The distance between being able to disappear and block another human because they disagree with you and perceiving your political opponents as barely human is not so great. And I haven't even touched on the echo chambers into which we tend to drift, the cyber and mental spaces that only reinforce that we ourselves are right, both in our beliefs and to be outraged that anyone disagrees. In the essay I keep meaning to write, I would talk about all of this and about how one of the most beautiful aspects of human nature is the ability to forgive. Or perhaps that ability is second in beauty only to the desire to do so. And how we are in danger of losing our capacity to bend, and how we are becoming intolerant. I would talk about my own repugnance at this notion that another human being can be so easily dismissed, not only because of the damage perhaps done to the recipient of that message, but because I suspect that forgiveness is dependent on aspects of ourselves that can too easily atrophy. I suspect that the business of repeatedly treating acquaintances, even strangers, as in some sense disposable, leads to devaluing the aspiration of working hard to understand why people should not be viewed that way. And what I want to say at this conference, which is designed specifically to help you plan a bridge between the work you do in solitude and the people out there who might read it and understand it and even love it, is that those pages of yours must remain unsullied by this particular trend toward dehumanizing the other, and in the process of doing so, losing the best of our most human qualities. So what does that mean for a writer? Let me start with what it doesn't mean, because even the notions of tolerance, empathy, and compassion can be taken to extremes. It doesn't mean accepting the monstrous. There is no compassion to be held for Hitler, for other murderous despots, or for any morally corrupt demagogue. Advocating for compassion and for holding close one's capacity to forgive is not the same thing as suggesting that one abandon either common sense or discernment, or for that matter, appropriate moral outrage. But few of us are in fact writing about the truly evil people who move among us. I would venture that most of us, when we write about quote unquote bad people, are writing about those whose behaviors and motives fall into the category of everyday sinners. People who treat one child better than another, people who cheat on a spouse, people who have bad tempers, people who shoplift, who are snobs, people who are self-absorbed, people who are thoughtless, people who are bores. So the Hitler exception rarely applies. More often, we are dealing with characters and whose flaws and foibles and sins fall well within a range deserving of our compassion. My father was such a person. To love my father was to love a deeply flawed human being, one capable of doing great good and also of inflicting great pain. A survivor of unimaginable childhood beatings, he was a damaged man who did damage. Writing about my father, as I do and always will, has been one of the most meaningful of my projects, because doing so always brings me back to that place of understanding that the value of people is not measured by the ease of our interactions with them. When I devote myself to conveying the experience of being my father's daughter, I must also try to understand the experience of being my father. When I put myself in his uncomfortable, tattered soul again and again, I am arguing against the disposability of human beings. And when I try to understand how he viewed the world, why he did the things he did, I am not doing so only to rehabilitate him or to whitewash the damage he did to me, but ultimately to strengthen my own capacity for compassion. And when I share the work with others, as much as I want them to understand the difficulties he caused in my life, I want them to understand how difficult life was for him. And through that process, I am by far the greatest beneficiary. Most of us have such figures in our lives. Those of us who write memoir are given the opportunity to work actively as we write to enlarge ourselves through cultivating compassion for these people. And as authors of fiction, we have the privilege and the responsibility of creating human beings like my father and like ourselves, people who are neither saints nor demons. And our task is not to create such people for the purpose of tearing them down, but to create them for the purpose of understanding them and of promoting the idea and the ideal that it is worth taking one's time and fighting one's own seeming self-interest and even enduring certain discomfort in order to be a voice on the side of the value of us all. To write a flawed character without interrogating both your own prejudices and your own capacity for empathy, to do so without seeking that character's humanity, is not only to write a less interesting character for your reader, but also to deny yourself the opportunity to grow as a human being and therefore as a writer. The thing about losing compassion for those with whom we disagree, the danger to blocking them and unfriending them and never giving them another thought, is that disagreement is ultimately a form of difference. If we cannot tolerate people who are different from us in their opinions, we are dangerously close to not being able to tolerate those who are different from us in their beliefs, different from us in their traditions, different from us in their cultures, different in their color, in their sexual orientation, in their gender, in their physical and cognitive health and abilities. And this, too, this road to intolerance is the pathway paved by those characters on whom we give up, and by every message we send out into the world with our words and our imaginations that there are ordinary people guilty of ordinary sins who do not deserve our full attention to their humanity and their worth. Simply put, as writers, our job is to increase the quotient of tolerance in the world, to plead the case for understanding, to create fertile ground for compassion and empathy both, even to convey the message that patience is still a virtue. We live in dangerous times. We are continually given the message that it is okay to protect ourselves from the challenges created by the full force of other people's minds and experiences and hearts, and yes, by their weaknesses. And were we just people on Twitter, on Facebook, exercising our right to use those words, block and unfriend, for these new contexts, we might be excused for participating in the culture of disposable human beings. But we are writers. We have the potential for greater influence, which is at all times a sacred trust. And so as you push to publish, as you push to write, I ask that you live up to that trust and honor those about whom you write, even when it is both uncomfortable and challenging to do so, especially when it is. I've never regretted standing up for my own work, and the only thing I've ever regretted is giving into edits that I knew were wrong and then having it appear over my name. And I think, there's always the potential in any of us to kind of defend too hard and not recognize a good edit when we see it. But to give you just kind of a guideline, I take about 50% on average on average. And I think that when somebody changes something and it's just not how you would put it or what you would say or a word you would use, you can't have it over your name. It's super simple. I don't write fiction about myself. It's really easy. If it's about me, I write it true. I write essays and things. It's not a virtue, it's not better than what other people do by any means, but I have zero interest in kind of saying like, oh, this thing happened to me, I'm gonna write a story about it. I just don't I don't have that connector in my head. So it's never really been an issue for me. I mean, there are things that drift into stories because like I have a child with language disabilities, so I wrote a story about a 65-year-old man with language disabilities. Things I know from my life end up in things, but they're always completely transfigured and transformed. So, but I think the formal thing is interesting. I was saying, I did a class yesterday on point of view, and I was saying that all the stories in my collection were generated by a craft challenge I set myself. So they weren't generated by me saying, like, boy, I really want to write a story about a woman whose husband left her and she goes to Italy. It was, I really want to write a story with a kind of omniscient narrator, but in which I kill off one of the point of view characters. And that was where I would start. Or I want to write a story where the backstory and the front story are equally weighted and the real story is what's going on between the two of them. So it was the same kind of formal entry into the work.
That's absolutely fair.
All right.
Everything about writing is incredibly open and joyful that people are writing, whether the gatekeepers think they should be or not. So I think it's great. I mean, it's really hard to get traditional publishers to look at work. It's unbelievably rare that they actually publish it. And I don't think that that means that people shouldn't share their work with the world. First I wanted to say that any one person's process isn't necessarily transferable, and I think it's really important to keep in mind that the trick is kind of to find what's right for you. One thing I will say with novels is I think that novels, much more than short stories, you need readers for them. Because it's really hard to hold the whole thing in your head and to have any sense of what the overall impression of it is. And you've been immersed in it for however long, well, I guess in your case, a month, but.
No, I extended, I didn't do it.
No, but you've been immersed in it for however long. And you really, I've seen such surprising reads on stuff where somebody thinks they've written something and they show it to a reader and they're like, that is not at all what's coming through. And I think that aside from all the sort of logistical stuff, I mean, I'm a great believer in kind of color-coded index cards and of turning the novel into a physical object of some other thing that doesn't have all those words in it. but just for organization. But what I really believe in is having conversations about it, because it's not just what the reader tells you, it's what happens in the dialogue where you realize, oh, that's what I'm trying to do, and this is what's important. And knowing things like what really matters is how you determine, okay, what do I want to start with? Where does it end? You know, but the first thing you have to get to with a draft that's a big messy draft, I think, is why does this story matter? What's the thing here that's really important to me? But there's you know, I mean, there's a reason it takes people 10 years to do this. It's kind of a mess.
Hi, I'm Kate Blakinger, and I'm a winner of the McGlynn Prize for Fiction this year. So I get to be a guest at the Push to Publish conference, which is just a wonderful place to meet other writers and to meet agents and editors publishing wonderful work from Philadelphia and beyond. And I encourage everybody to submit to the McGlynn Prize. It's really a wonderful honor. And you get to be published in a great magazine, Philadelphia Stories.
Hi. So I know of this program. It's been going on for years. A lot of friends have come, so I know they have a great time. And also this year I have a novel, so I thought I would just practice talking about it with some agents and some editors and meet great people.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. I know of Push to Publish only because I know of Philadelphia Stories. I've been a fan for a while. I've sort of seen it on the website. I've wanted to come, and this year I finally decided to do it.
And are you a writer?
I am a writer, yeah. I write all sorts of stuff. I teach writing, I write for a website, and I am also working on a novel this year, so I'm trying to put that out into the world today.
I'm a poet. I've been published in a few publications, but I'm looking to better understand how to go about coming up with the collective book idea and to learn more about publishing in general.
I have some questions for one of the agents regarding a piece that I would like to have published one day. Yes.
I've been working on some things, and this is kind of my maiden voyage into something like this, so I'm just trying to get my feet wet, and when I do finally finish a novel, what's the best way to go about and sell it?
I'm a fiction editor for Philadelphia Stories, and I've been doing this for a few years now, and it's always fun to help other writers who are looking to improve their work. So that's what I'm doing here.
I am an editor-in-chief for a very small press. We're headquartered in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. We just opened our doors about a year and a half ago, so we're looking for new authors all the time. Right now we have 3 books, and we have a 4th one coming out this year, so we're tiny. We're definitely looking for new authors. So that's what brings me here.
I'm here to talk about the publishing program at Rosemont College. We have a fantastic program with concentrations in children's and young adult. We have a concentration in editing, we have a concentration in business, and we have a great concentration in design. So my name is Marshall Warfield, and I hope you're enjoying Push to Publish.